Good evening and welcome to another mystical carousel show. Before we start tonight, we'd like to make you aware of a show on the Things Network, which is aimed at the 22-hour veteran suicide awareness. It's a podcast that is very close to me personally, being a veteran myself. So myself and Lois have put in an hour's work trying to raise a little bit more awareness for this worthy cause. So if you're available on Saturday evening, please do go over to the Things Network and have a good look and listen to what's being said by the various co-hosts that will be putting their thread on there on Saturday night. So we have Sam and Lynn with us at the moment. We will have Nick joining us in about 10 minutes or so. But tonight we're going to be talking about haunted battlefields. And many people know about Gettysburg being probably one of the most famous worldwide because of its constant sightings and sounds that are being heard by various people that visit the site. So we decided we would look at the haunted battlefields. Now, there's been battles since civilization began. Since human beings were able to pick berries off of trees and argue with each other, there has always been battles between one and another. So tonight we are going to mention a few such haunted battlefields. And I would like to start with one that dates back to 1864 in the United States. And in the summer, following the Battle of the Wilderness, the Union Army under George Meade, accompanied by the commander of all the United States armies, U.S. Grant, encountered the Army of Northern Virginia in bloody clash after bloody clash, and following each battle, the Union troops would slip around the Confederate right and continue their drive towards Richmond, while Lee would hurry his increasingly weakened force to the next defensive position. By July, the two armies forced each other at Cold Harbor near Richmond. Over 100,000 Union troops opposed about 60,000 Confederate soldiers. And although the battle lasted nearly 2 weeks, the worst of the fighting was on June the 3rd, 1864, when the Union Army assaulted the entrenched Confederates. Approximately 7,000 Union casualties were sustained in the attacks that morning, which Grant ordered broken off shortly after noon. Men trapped under fire between the lines used their bayonets and drinking cups to create temporary breastworks. Wounded and dying men lay in heaps, and some were used to shelter survivors in the field. In his memoirs, Grant later wrote that the assault was his greatest error of the war, and that he would never order a similar again. After several days of facing each other in trenches, Grant dispatched some of his troops to the Shenandoah Valley, and then yet again slipped around Lee's flank to threaten Petersburg. The Army of Northern Virginia withdrew it to entrenchments around Petersburg and Richmond. Most of the dead on the fields at Cold Harbor were hastily buried in shallow graves. Ever since the battle, there have been reports of strange sightings and activities on and near the battlefield. Ghosts of men from both sides have been reported, as have the sounds of gunfire and thundering hoofbeats from horses. Several groups of visitors and paranormal investigators have reported a sudden thick fog emerging over the battlefield in conditions in which the fog wouldn't normally be possible. One group visited with the intent of photographing reported apparitions, only to be forced to withdraw by the sudden dense fog, which to them appeared more as thick smoke than mist. There have been reports from visitors and locals of hearing cannon fire and feeling the concussions of the guns. One visitor to the spot where Union Colonel Tompkins was shot in the head felt a sudden stabbing pain in his own temple. The nearby Garthrite House, was used as a field hospital. The family living there forced to shelter in its cellar while the surgeons worked above them. The house today has been reported to be haunted by the ghost of a young girl who may have been part of the displaced family. The same spirit has been reported wandering around the graves at Cold Harbor Cemetery, which was built in 1866, when many of the hastily buried bodies were dug up and reinterred there. Cold Harbor is but one of many purportedly haunted sites along Grant's bloody trail through Virginia, but it is one of the most attractive to ghost hunters. So apart from my teeth getting in the way there, I do apologise. I find that quite interesting when you put that alongside Gettysburg. And obviously Gettysburg was made famous because of the battalion of troops that the United States Army had used and portrayed in movies.
I find that interesting as well, Wayne, when, you know, it's said to be haunted by the ghost of a child, a little girl, because you don't ever think about these battlefields and that as having children. I wouldn't think that. And for the child to be displaced, that child's going back to its home, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, that would be the last thing that I would ever have thought of on that. Honestly, that's interesting, that.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, the family of the house was displaced. They were literally forced to go into the cellar while all these wounded troops were being brought in to be treated by the surgeons and the doctors. And this family were just told, you know, get downstairs, get out of the way. We don't want you here. Something has obviously happened to that child for her to remain there.
Yeah.
And then obviously she's, I don't know if it's the same girl that is seen walking around the cemetery. It could be something to do with one of the people that were upstairs. Maybe had done something to her, and she was trying to find the grave of that person.
Yeah.
You know, I think with further investigation, I think that might be quite interesting to see if anybody gets any answers as to why the girl is still there when she was, you know, held downstairs with the rest of her family. Something clearly wasn't right there for her to still remain there.
Yeah. Very interesting.
I think it's a good one. And like I say, when you look at the likes of Gettysburg is probably the most well-known Civil War era battlefield and battle that most people know of because of movies and documentaries as such. And more recently, a lot of the videos and sound recordings that have come from Gettysburg as well, you know, you're like, oh, okay. And that sort of tends to take over, but then you don't realise there is so much more.
Yeah, very interesting.
So, shall we go to Sam with one of yours?
God.
Oh, God. Okay, so my one is sort of more around the lines of what they used to call Egglesburg. So it's actually where I am situated, but I'll call it Egglesburg so then nobody knows where I actually live, because that would be a bit weird. But yeah, so I have down that during the 8th to the 11th centuries, Aylesbury was a very significant settlement in the Anglo-Saxon England. It was known as Egglesburg in the Kingdom of Mercia. During this time, this was a main hub for both trade and also military training for the Saxons. Viking raids occurred often, so Edward the Elder, the son of who they used to call Alfred, or Ethelred, I think it was more than Alfred, but now we would call it Alfred
the Unready.
Ethelred. Yeah, so now we would call it Alfred the Great. Set up fortified burhs, I don't know what burhs means, but burhs, to protect Mercia and secure themselves. Despite Viking presence in England being prominent, Aylesbury remained under Saxon control until later it became part of the reconsolidation, I can't say that, of England under the rule of the Wessex kings. By the late 10th to 11th century, Vikings increasingly integrated into English society and adapted to the change of religious and political landscapes following King Canute's conquest of England in 1066. It also says during 1066, it said that both the Norse and Saxons fought vigilantly. A notable burial ground from Egilsberg in the Viking era was used to house the bodies of men who fell due to battles throughout the few areas that were confirmed to be conquered during the Viking raids. And the one thing that I will say is that this area was actually one place where we actually went to with Truth Beyond Paranormal with Wayne and another one of our team members who really, really loves Viking history. So we decided, well, Mick loves Viking history, so we will take him to this place for a paranormal evening. And we didn't get loads of activity happening, but one in particular thing stood out to all of us. Wayne had a constellation app on his phone, and when he pointed it down towards his feet, he had a Viking longboat come up under his feet. And we still to this day have no idea, because being in the area where we were, where it said that there was many Vikings that were buried there, it was strange that the one constellation that came up on that app was literally in the floor. It was in the ground of this Viking longboat.
And that area was well known to be a Viking settlement back in the day.
Yeah.
What
So,
county is that in? What county is it in?
It's in Buckinghamshire. Oh, right. What county am I in? Yeah,
yeah, I
Buckinghamshire.
think it's Buckinghamshire.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was strange because we were literally walking around these fields, and originally they used to be a Viking settlement there. And then for countless years after that, it just literally retained itself back to farmland.
Yeah.
And it was more grazing than crop farming. And we were walking around these fields, and we found the remains of an old church and various bits and bobs. And for some unknown reason, I can't remember what it was, one of the apps, I think, had said beneath your feet or under your feet. And
yes, I remember.
I then put the app on, and we were looking around to see sort of what constellations were around us. And this message came through on the other app, so I put the phone towards the floor, and I went, "What on earth is this?" And everybody come over and had a look, and you could literally see this Viking longboat was right underneath our feet. Amazing. And I didn't realise there was a constellation of a Viking longboat, but there it was. And I'm like, oh my God, look at that. And obviously we know some of the noble Vikings were, they were putting their boats, weren't they, in the burial mounds and things like that. Yeah. And if they were having a sea burial, then the ship was launched, the longboat was launched out to sea, and then they would set fire to it, wouldn't they? So it was so bizarre to actually find that longboat underneath our feet.
Yeah, because it could have been any constellation.
Sorry, has anybody ever done any like digging there? Do you know?
Yes, they have. Yeah, so they did find. This was actually reported by some students that were looking into archaeology. So they were basically training to be archaeologists, and some students had come down there. And were digging and actually found Roman remains as well, but the main thing that they found was actually something that they believe was actually a Viking, some Viking treasures and stuff where they had buried with them, because they used to do that, where they would bury items with themselves to sort of say, I'm going to go up and meet with Odin. And I need to bring an offering in order to get into Valhalla. So they would bury themselves with their swords if they were Viking warriors, or they would bury themselves with items of what they used to make when they were alive, if they were female specifically.
Precious things.
Precious items, jewelry, stuff like that. And they dug up some stuff that actually they were like, that we think that this was actually belonged to this individual who was around during this time period and actually gave the name of the of what they would classify as the I don't know what they call them, whether it's they didn't call them lords. What did they call them? I've now forgotten what they called them. When they used to
I
have
just
the
call them
settlements.
nobles.
Yeah, so they used to have settlements, and then they used to have certain names for the people that would run that settlement.
Yeah, it would
and
just be typical hierarchy. It's the same equivalent of the mayor and
that was it. No,
things like that.
Lords,
the Jarl. Yeah, so they think it was actually the stuff that they found was from the Jarl of that settlement because it was very regal looking.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was quite interesting. And like Wayne said, it could, I say to myself all the time, that could have been any constellation ever. It could have been any one of them. But to have an actual Viking boat underneath our feet when we know that's a burial grounds of Vikings was just freaking weird.
Yeah.
See, I picked up
on
It certainly got me scratching my head instead of shivering. I made the mistake of going to the investigation with just shorts and a t-shirt on, and it was hot during the day, and it got freezing cold at night time, and I was still wearing shorts. I'm like, nah, this is getting too cold. I want to go home. And then all of a sudden, this Viking longboat come up, and I was just too excited to worry about the cold.
Yeah, it's crackers, isn't it? See, I pick up on sounds a bit awful, this, but I pick up on dead bodies under my feet. So I could be walking through a field and pick up on it anywhere. And I can just feel it just oozes up my feet. It's just weird. It's like electricity that goes straight through my feet.
Yeah.
And into my hands. It's amazing. I'd love to go and walk around. Really would. Yeah.
Yeah. It was quite interesting, I will admit. And it's something that, even though the rest of the episode is probably very boring to watch, I'm not even going to lie about it because very little happened. But we got something very interesting there. Why don't we find more Viking swords? That's to be honest, Brenda, that is something which is quite interesting. I would say that sometimes maybe it could be the fact that I know that some of them denounce their swords as well. So some of them wouldn't be buried with them if they felt that they had fallen in a way that was not honourable enough, then they wouldn't be buried with them. And stuff like that. But who the hell knows? I mean, I know that there's probably loads of them buried all over the place. They just haven't been found, maybe.
You've also got to remember is over a passage of time, things get covered up deeper than, standard. When we bury someone, it's 6 foot deep. But you need to remember that with the likes of the Jorvik Museum and various other Roman settlements, the actual original floor level is a lot lower than what it is now. And you look at the Jorvik Museum when it was witnessed in, I think it was the late 60s, an electrician was down there doing some work and a Roman came through the wall, but he could only see from the knees upwards. He couldn't see his feet because his feet was actually walking on the old Roman road. And it was after that report that they looked at the depth underneath and found the Roman road underneath the cellar. And there it was. I think it was something like 5 or 6 inches below the cellar floor was this old Roman road. So over a passage of time, everything gets covered up a lot deeper and deeper. And it could just be that the people that are out there digging just aren't digging deep enough.
Yeah.
So instead of 6 foot, it could be 12 or 15 foot, maybe even more. But like we said, with a lot of Vikings of the day, they would have had a sea burial because they were seamen.
Yeah,
they came from the sea. They go back to the sea.
I was going to say, they would go, very true, Wayne. They would go out to sea on these Viking longships. They would then be set on fire. And you think, probably some of these swords will probably be found at the bottom of the ocean because the boats would have just broken apart.
And obviously, if you're if you're too
So a
far
lot
in
of
and you
my
have one of these burials and you put on the long boat and you're sent off down the river and they set fire to it, you would probably find that underneath the riverbed, so many feet down, you would probably find the odd sword
Yeah.
that's been covered over by
yeah,
centuries of
like
mud and
sea
silt
bed.
that have covered over the top of it.
Yeah. My surname means sea warrior.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the Murphy name was originally Mahadan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it looks
What
like
sort of
I
Celtic?
have found that I've got Viking, just a tiny little bit of Viking. So obviously it was like pillaged and raped down in Ireland, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
all of those things.
Yeah,
All of the stuff.
I find it very interesting about the Viking.
Yeah, yeah. I had to go more into it because of our team member Mick. So I needed to go more into it to find out more about the place, and some of the stuff that came up. I was like, Jesus, okay, this goes back a long way, a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, as paranormal investigators, that's part of what we do. It's part of our job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, you can go to a location and you are looking at it as it was in whatever time period it is that they've set it up as. So, say for instance, Ruffin Control Tower in Bury St Edmunds was predominantly known as a World War II United States Air Force base. So most of the relics that are in there are 1940s based, when the United States Army was based there with the Air Force. So there's lots of plane memorabilia, bits of the planes that had crashed, and uniforms and things like that, all aimed at that time period. But when you get some information come through while you're investigating, and you've then got to look into that and research it. If you get something that comes through that's before that time period,
they did. I
you've then got to dive deeper back
did.
and look at the history of the site rather than just what happened at that particular time period. And it's surprising how you find out things. One such place, which I absolutely love investigating, is Kelvin and Hatch Nuclear Bunker. Now, that is 3 floors, possibly 4, underground. And it's in a hillside. And people turn around and say, well, if it was built in the 50s, how is it that it's haunted? And I say to people, well, you know, it could be that the spirits are coming in visitation. It may be, again, residual stone tape theory, something like that.
Yeah.
But it could also be spirits of people that were here on the land before it became
That's right.
a nuclear bunker. Nearby was a cemetery where some of the graves were actually removed. You also had farmland nearby. There could have been deaths on the farm. Hi, Tom.
What's up?
So you know, the history of a place can go back centuries.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily
exactly.
have to be something that happened in that location from the time period it was built. It could have been something that was there before. And Sam had it on a live feed last night. Somebody asked her if she had spirits there, and so they said, how far back does your location go to? And I so wanted to turn around and say, it goes back to when the earth was formed, you plonker.
yeah, exactly. It's not so much
it's not
about
the building.
actual place. No, it's not
Exactly.
the building, it's the land it's on.
Yes.
You've
we
got
now know that this land goes back to the 10th
millions
century.
of years.
Yeah.
The bit of land that your house sits on goes back to the dawn of time.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could have a ghost of a dinosaur walk through your living room, in theory.
Yeah,
See,
exactly.
what you're saying about that nuclear bunker, the one I like is up here in Nantwich. They call it the secret nuclear bunker. It's signposted. The secret nuclear bunker.
Yeah, the one at Kelvin and Hatches as well. Secret nuclear bunker, and you're like, it's not much of a secret, is it?
No.
Not really, no, because it's got a signpost.
Myself and this guy, unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. He was a fantastic psychic medium, absolutely amazing guy, Steve. we picked up, and it was a pagan settlement. There's nothing to say there was one there, but that's what we were picking up in a certain part outside the building. So, and it was very active. We were being walked around, and it was full on there. So I thought that was really interesting. So you've got a good point there. You know, doesn't all start from that date that we know of.
Yeah, I mean, just because a house was built in the 1970s. I mean, the house I'm in was built in 1974.
Yeah,
I moved into this house originally when I was 3 months old, shortly after it was finished built.
Yeah,
you know, brand new housing estate. But before then, this was all farmland, and there are during World War II, a lot of German planes flew over here because a lot of the American bases were dotted around Colchester in North Essex and South Suffolk. So a lot of these German bombers were coming over to bomb the air bases.
yeah.
And
so
the RAF was going up and they were shooting them down. And I can remember as clear as day when I was in junior school or primary school, as some people will know, a friend of mine lived on the back of one of the other side of the farmers' fields that were obviously farmers' fields during the war, now had turned into allotments. And my friend said to me, he says, come to the end of the garden, have a look at this. And he lifted up this tarpaulin, which had all these fallen leaves and branches on it. And the first thing I was greeted by was a swastika.
No.
And I'm like, oh my God. And he lifted the whole thing off, and it was complete tail fin of, I think it was a Heinkel. It was a German bomber that had been shot down in the area. And my friend's granddad had covered it up so no one could take it away. He wanted it as a souvenir. And it was literally the complete tail fin, and the whole swastika was on there. The bullet holes were there. And I'm like, that's amazing. And he said, yeah, well, we're not supposed to know it's here because Granddad said we'd get in trouble if they find it. And I'm like, right, okay, so he put the tarpaulin back over. And I think it was about 10 years after that, his dad wanted to clear that area for his allotment, and they handed it into Duxford Museum.
Wonderful. They still got it, yeah?
And I think Duxford have still got it.
Wow.
But obviously, that's only the tail fin. They haven't got any of the rest of it. So restoring it's going to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
But there was loads of bombers that got brought down over our area. So
they screwed that up, didn't they? It was originally a British symbol of peace. Now
we're too far past it now. Never mind.
So I mean, you could be standing there. You could be digging up your potatoes, and all of a sudden you see this German pilot come walking past you. You go, "What the hell?" You know.
Well, I just trying to get my potatoes, man.
You would instantly think. You would instantly think that, oh, what the hell's the ghost of a German pilot doing here? Yeah. If you don't know the history, then all of a sudden, when the history is explained to you, you'd be like, "Oh, well, that makes sense now."
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There was a point that Iron made earlier, actually, which I will touch upon for Iron. And yeah, he was saying something about Vikings. I don't know the Viking stuff, if they went over to America or not. He said that he thinks that they settled into Canada first and then kind of integrated. And if I remember rightly, they did go to America, by the way.
Sure they did,
Yeah, there was a very popular rumor that ended up getting confirmed that the Vikings had actually travelled further than we originally thought. And the original claim was that not only did they didn't stop after England and Scotland, they then went up through to Greenland and then down to Canada and then on to America from there, because it was the easiest way to go from land to land without going over that big expanse of water.
See, and then they stopped here because they got all fat and lazy like us Americans do. They just didn't want to go on anymore. They said, fuck it. I'll just stay.
They got introduced. They got introduced to tobacco.
Yeah,
the wacky tobacco.
Yeah.
Earlier you were talking about the swastika, and the strangest thought entered my mind that really was kind of off topic, but had to do with the swastika. How unfortunate would it be if a company was named Swas, right? Or just Swa, and they sold merchandise, and one of their merchandise was a sticker, and then it'd be a swastika.
Yeah.
It's just how my mind works. It's always going off in every direction.
I do find it amusing when people see a swastika and they automatically literally get this flashback to World War II. And recently we had somebody had put a swastika on a footpath outside our local hospital, and it made local newspapers, local radio were all reporting on how somebody had put a swastika down on the footpath outside the hospital. And it ended up on the local newspaper's Facebook page. And everybody was outraged. Nothing but angry emojis. Instead of the likes, loves, or caring, all them angry emojis. And I just thought, right, do you know what? I'm not going to sit here and allow the person that put the swastika there get a pasting by the general public on Facebook for a perfectly innocent thing that they put on the pavement, because they included a photo.
Well,
and that was the biggest mistake. Not one person on that feed actually noticed that the end legs of the swastika were going the other way. And there was dots in the swastika. In between the legs of the swastika, there were dots.
Yeah.
So I just put on there as a comment, really, you people need to look up your history of the swastika. It's a Buddhist symbol meaning good luck and good health.
Yes.
But if people
and
are
that all
really
makes
that,
And they
sense putting it
ripped-
out there.
Yeah.
They were ripping into this person that had put this down on the floor. And I said, the person that put it down there could be a Buddhist or a Hindu and has put that down there to wish anybody that walks over it good health and good fortune. And you've just ripped that person to pieces.
Yeah.
we could have just
And I
closed
thought it
in
was
the
quite
open ends.
disgusting that they took that approach.
Yeah.
Could have just closed in the open ends of it, and then it just looks like the Windows symbol. Yeah, and it's innocent.
Yes.
Yeah,
Someone
exactly.
from Microsoft has been to the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you see, that's the problem. Without people actually looking into the history of things, you get the wrong end of the stick, and that can lead to further problems. They didn't see the
Yeah.
fact that the swastika legs were the other way round and they had the dots in, which made it the Buddhist stroke Hindu symbol for good luck and fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crackers.
And it was placed outside a hospital. Why would you really put a Nazi swastika outside a general hospital?
Right.
You wouldn't. What message would you be trying to convey by putting a swastika on the floor outside the reception of a hospital? Nothing.
It's not like
None
it was a
whatsoever.
Hebrew hospital or
Nothing.
something,
But-
I mean, that, then that would have been a hate crime, but,
Exactly. But this person, they couldn't identify the person that had done it. But I was simply sort of reminding people that if you look at the history of the swastika, you will find that it's not what it is intended for.
True that.
And
Yeah,
what it's
you're
been
right.
portrayed as, it's actually a good symbol, not a bad one.
Yeah.
And the article ended up getting removed because I think what had happened was the local newspaper had actually looked up the history of the swastika and realised I was right. So they removed the post altogether.
I'm sure some of the pyramids have got that symbol there somewhere as well.
Yeah. The
People are just quick to be
swastika
offended
appears
by
all
everything.
over the world, even in
Yeah.
places that never even took part in the Second World War.
People are just quick to be on the trigger with being offended about everything and anything they
Yep.
possibly can, no matter how ignorant their offensiveness is. It's,
Yeah.
it's the way the world has turned, and it's
Yeah.
stupid. I feel like I was
Wow.
born in the wrong time period. I should have been like 30 years earlier. Of course, I'd be dead by now, but
Well, I don't know, if you were born 30 years earlier, Tom, you'd only be 80.
I know. Well, I
You might
plan
still
on
be
being
with us.
around. I plan on being one of those guys that's like 120 some years old, sitting at the end of the bar, smoking a cigarette, drinking a beer, and people going, "How the hell is he still alive?"
When you said that, I instantly got the Trump thing about the 150-year people,
Oh, God.
50-year-old people getting state pensions.
The oldest one out there is a woman who's like 300 some years old.
Yeah, 300.
Still
I
has
think
an
she
active
put
Social
herself at the
Security
same age as Enoch. 360 years old.
She might
Turns
be.
out Moses is still around and he's living.
And I'm
in
just like, oh my God. But it just proved the point at how governments of the world are buying things and paying into things that really got nothing to do with anything with that country.
Yeah.
Yep.
They'd rather waste trillions of pounds or dollars on pointless things in other areas. And even our government does it.
Yeah, they do.
And I'll tell you what.
And they're slowly getting found out. And
Yeah.
I think what Elon Musk has done, like him or hate him, I think what he's done is a good thing. He's uncovered all of these trillions that have been siphoned off in stupid places. And it reminded me of Independence Day.
And they hate
when
Jeff
Goldblum's dad turned around and said, "You don't think they paid $30,000 for a toilet seat, do you?"
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
And I'm just thinking, it's there. Someone has put that in the film that you don't think they'd spend $30,000 on a toilet seat. That was a hint, and no one noticed it.
Silly things, yeah.
Judd Hirsch is a master at that dry, subtle humor. Sarcasm, like he has been since his days on Taxi. That was the guy that put his dad, by the way.
Jeff Goldblum is a fine species of a man. Yes,
I did like Jeff Goldblum. I know we're off topic a little bit, but I saw him on the BAFTAs, and wow, he did a piano rendition. I think it was As Time Goes By.
Yes.
I saw that. It was in the section where they were looking at all the people that had passed away this year in the movie and TV industry. And he was sitting there at the piano playing As Time Goes By. And I just thought, you know what? I never knew he played the piano. What an awesome song to play while that's being shown on the screen. So, hats off to him.
Would you like to hear about my battle?
Of course.
Yeah. Right, so I live in Connors Quay in Flintshire in North Wales, and we have a massive park here called Wepper Park. At the end of the park, we have a castle, so it wasn't quite finished at the time of this battle, but King Henry II, so going back to that time period now, he decided he wanted to come over to Wales and take all of Gwynedd, so it's Anglesey and all that part of Wales there. So we took 30,000 men, and he camped out by Chester Castle. So it was like the 1000s. So it was he camped out there. Anyway, he's got a guy with him called Henry Fitzroy, and Henry Fitzroy led 30,000 men over to Anglesey. But Henry II decided he wanted to take a local castle called Rutland. You ever heard of Rutland Castle?
Yep.
Yeah, Rutland Castle. He wanted that. So he took these, let me just read it out of here. He took a smaller force of men and made his way over to Saltley Marshes, which is by Broughton Aerospace. So that area there, and he moved towards Rutland to capture the castle. Our Prince Owain responded by raising a Welsh army of 3,000 men. So Owain had two of his sons in this wood here, and it was what was the name? What was their names now? David and it was Conan, David and Conan, and they were there. Anyway, Owain got told about these men coming over, so he raised a 3,000 men army and took them over to Eulo to help his sons, because they were there on the way really with just a few, and they waited for Henry to come through, and there was a battle in our woods with Henry II and our prince, and most of the English soldiers were killed, but Henry did get taken out, and he was taken out by Roger, Earl of Hertford. 15 minutes later, he would have been dead. The history would have been completely different. But we do have a lot of hauntings in that area of the woods. A lot of them. We do hear drums, you know, like military drums. We get that often. I never believed it until I actually heard it myself. I'd heard it off a few people, didn't believe it. My sons went out one night with a mate and cut through the woods on the way home, went down over this stream, and they heard the drums. And as they run over the bridge, they seen a big, they seen a big ball of light come out of the side of the wall of the hill. And they run up there and they went home. They fell into my door and they were panicking. They were crying. So I asked them what had happened. They said they heard these drums and they seen this big ball of light, and they both described it. The mate then fell through my front door because he was crying. They were all upset. And he'd seen the same thing as well. And he didn't know what to do. But I didn't believe it. And then one night I was there 2:30 in the morning doing a ghost hunt with these people. And I could hear it. And I never said nothing. Because this guy's wife and him would have said they'd have agreed with everything. Do you know when you say something, some people just agree with it? That's what they were like.
Yeah.
That's what they were like. But I never said nothing. But she did say, "Did you hear the drums?" And he said, "No, I never heard none. There wasn't any." But there was. And people still hear things. There's a lot of activity there. I've got a fantastic picture of a guy called Emlyn the Archer who appeared to me. And it's just absolutely, if you sit in a certain place in them woods where the battle was, you get your hair lifted up. I mean, lifted. And you get touched. And it's in the same place where that big ball of light came from. So it's very active. And I think some people say, like they say, "Oh, can you hear hooves of horses?" Well, there's fields of cattle up the top and there's horses in the next field. So you can't say, you know, and with me, I'll just say, no, it's not that, because you can't say that, or it's not this and whatever. But it's extremely haunted. So these hauntings go right down to the 1000s. I mean, it could go back even further than that, because there was an old fort up on that hill. And the top of the field there, that's haunted as well. And they're still protecting the area where the old fort was. But there's dozens and dozens of soldiers, hundreds of them that were killed there. And I think I found some of the burial mounds as well, because I've taken quartz home, which were found from the area, and my house has become haunted, and I've had to take them back. They place them round graves, don't they?
Yeah.
And I was getting, you know, these things in that, I was petrified because it kept coming into my house. It was awful, but I actually had to take them back, and I did. And I
always good not to take anything off of the graves, because you might end up having to take it back.
Yeah. So I had to say prayers and everything.
And again, in that situation, back when that battle was going on, those trees probably weren't there.
No, they weren't. But
so that would have been an open field.
Yeah. No, it was 7 miles of thick forest then. It's a lot less now. But the ones that we have got, which are ancient, are still babies, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, to what they were then. They'd have been saplings, or the great-grandparents of the grandchildren of the saplings from then. But it's really interesting places. So, you know, it's not just these big battles. But then that was a big battle, because it was a fight for Wales. We were trying to keep Wales, and they were trying to take it off us. You know, so it was really interesting. But the whole of the coastline down here was just a bloodbath. And the actual battle was called the Battle of Carousel. But if you can go down all through the coast, you find it went down that way, because it all went up to Rutland down by the coast. And the fields, they say the fields were awash with blood all the way down, all the way down. Even by Gurrick Castle, where they done I'm a Celebrity. If you go past there, there's open fields. It was just like a bath of blood there, where people were coming through, and all the lanes and all the streets and doctors' surgeries and certain buildings are called Carousel. So it must have had some kind of a big impact for people to keep renaming it. And a lot of people don't even know what it means, to be honest, but the history's there if you want to go and see it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But it's very haunted area, which I love.
Kate, I don't know how to answer that question because I can't be in the park after dark, and that's when most paranormal investigations take place. The park closes at sunset, and if you're caught in there, you get a fine. It's a state park.
Do you?
No, right.
Well, you
I
don't
must admit, if we go into places after closing time, we end up getting kicked out. So
I would get fined. I would get fined.
Why?
And there would be disciplinary action since I'm an employee of the park.
Oh, yeah.
Brenda asked a good question a few minutes back about would you sleep in at a castle overnight?
Yeah.
And my answer is I have. I've spent a couple of nights in Colchester Castle in Essex. It's Britain's oldest and probably the most intact Norman keep in the British Isles. And I've spent 2 nights, not continuously, but a night one year and a night the other. And I have literally slept in the, I don't know whether you call them the dungeons or the basement, underneath the castle, which you have got like a viewing area where you can actually see the Temple of Claudius, which actually stood there before the castle was built, before Boadicea came and ransacked the place and burnt the whole thing down. And then they rebuilt the castle and the grounds off of the remnants, and you can still see the blackened bricks today. And I've actually witnessed a pair of Roman legs walking through that basement, and it was witnessed by 2 other people, and we actually chased it into a sealed off escape tunnel down in those basements.
How good's that?
And it was awesome, because what it was, I was there as a part of a public event, and we'd taken a group down into the cellar, into the basement area, and it's 6 individual rooms, and they're all connected by a low sort of low ceiling tunnel that led through into the next room. And it was literally 2 rows of 3. And we've gone down to the end of the first row, and we're all sitting there on benches. And there was a guy standing at the end tunnel that led through to the bottom one of the second row. And in that area, there is a series of gravestones that have been put in there. Whether they were still in there when they first sort of reopened the castle, or whether they were brought in from another area, but these gravestones were there. And this lady, one of the ladies, had said, I've got a bit of a cold spot, so I've gone walking over to her, and I've got my temperature gun, and I'm sort of checking around her, and she had a slight cold spot over her left shoulder. And as I turned to look at her and say to her, you've got a little bit of a cold bit here.
What the hell was that?
I looked like she'd been dragged off. I looked over to this guy, Terry, who was standing at the tunnel entrance. I said, is there someone standing there with you? And he went, no, why? And I said, I can see someone's legs through the tunnel. And the lady that was standing next to me, who reported this cold spot, went, yes, I can see it. And we both got up and we went over towards this guy, Terry, and we went through the tunnel, and we could still see these legs, and they walked off and turned the corner. And me and this Terry guy followed them into this tunnel entrance, and then it just disappeared. And I'm like, okay, that's not right. And then this green light appeared on the wall. And at first I thought, I'm being skeptic,
I like that green light.
could this be from the security lights? Now, they've got security lamps down there, and they've got a box every now and then in the wall, and it had a green light on it. And we'd previously gone round and put black tape over it, put masking tape over the top so that green light wasn't projected throughout the area. And we said, well, maybe it's that. So I've gone back out the tunnel and I've checked the box, and no, masking tape's still over the top of it, still covered up. So I went back into the tunnel and we went, Spirit, is that you, the Roman that was walking through here with the strapped sandals? Can you move the light to the left? And it moved to the left. But then, do you realise that you should have moved on by now? Can you move to the right, please? And it moved to the right. And we were literally just asking different questions, and we were asking it to go bigger, go smaller, go round in a circle, and it was doing everything to order. And just as Terry said, do you realise you're dead? All of the lights in the whole place went on. And I turned around to him, I went, you've upset him. And it wasn't. It turned out that it was the end of the night, and the caretaker had turned all the lights on and told us all we had to leave. And I'm like, why is it that something always happens right at the worst time?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I loved it there. The 2 nights I spent in there were awesome. You know, you hear things that you wouldn't normally hear, and just laying there with your eyes closed, and whether it's your mind sort of generating these noises that you're hearing, or whether you're actually hearing something, it's just something completely different.
When I first read that comment, I thought that said stroke museum, and I thought that's either really bad medically or it's perverted. I don't know if I want to visit this museum either way. The stroke museum.
Kate, I've been there. Museum. I've been to that museum.
Sorry,
they had wrong people. They had the wrong people at that sleepover.
Yeah,
or the right people. Depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You know.
But yeah, I mean, even places like with Colchester Castle. I mean, we had during the Civil War, we had the siege of Colchester here. And we've got just before you go up to the hill to the city centre, you've got a place called the Siege House, where there was a lot of a group of soldiers were under siege in this building. Huh. It's now a restaurant.
Go figure. Nick's late. What?
Because it's a grade listed building, they have to keep it, and they can't pull it down. And I was always fascinated as a child whenever we drove past it to go into town. I would always see there's little red dots all over the building. And I always ask, what were them red dots? And they go, I swear the painter run out of paint. And it was years after that I found out that what these red dots were, they weren't actually red dots. They were metal plugs. And what they'd done was they put these metal plugs in all the musket round holes that were made.
To fill them up.
So during the Civil War, when they were firing the musket rounds at the people in the building, they literally put these red caps over the top of the hole to indicate that that's a bullet hole.
Wow.
So, and the whole bit is literally riddled with musket round holes. And they've had to literally see the red dots all over the building. I'll try and see if I can I'll take a photo next time I go past it. It's an awesome building.
Yeah.
Evening, Nick.
How you guys doing?
Oh,
Nick has arrived.
You sound excited to be on tonight, Nick.
How you guys doing?
Hello.
Yeah, I know I'm late. I feel so happy to be here.
I was
like, damn it.
Earlier, but something came up. Yeah, as Kate said, well,
he's like, damn it, I thought I was going to be the only American in here.
What are you talking about? No, you're the only pickle that's here.
Is it still snowing there, Nick?
Have you played that for everyone here, or is that the first time they're hearing
That
it?
was the first
Oh,
time.
no.
Yeah,
Is
you
that going to
also
be a
report-
ringtone now?
Yeah, I told them that.
It is going to be a ringtone, isn't it?
I don't know. Maybe.
Every time, cool.
Yeah, I sent a voicemail to him. I said, you should make that not only that, you should make that a text
Oh, I
tone.
just smacked my face on the freaking chair.
I said, imagine
Did you hear that?
walking through like a library or some quiet place, and all of a sudden that starts ringing.
Yep.
Yeah, make it
And then
just
it
his
goes
ring
off.
or his
Just
Facebook sound for
Yeah, it's too bad there's like no Facebook ring to like you can have for
two
your own
people
like.
grabbing the jingles.
yeah, individual.
I just said that out loud again, didn't I? Damn it!
Oh yeah, I
Every
did forget
time.
to mention that Willow isn't here with us tonight because she decided she'd had enough and wanted a night off.
Well, she's
No, I'm
here in
only joking.
spirit. She's
Um,
here in spirit, right up there.
She's here in spirit. Look up in the little orb in the corner. She's with us, but not personally. Not feeling too good, so we said it's all right. We can handle it.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So anyway,
I don't
Nick,
miss an
I don't know.
opportunity.
It didn't even make much sense.
I don't know whether Tom, have you looked up any haunted battlefields
Battlefields. The
Can you
only
think of any?
battlefield that I
in your
was
explorations?
No, I have not, but I've been close to one, and I wanted to get to it, but I could not, and I'll explain why. And I'll be brief. But I was in Gettysburg.
I was thinking you were going to be saying Gettysburg.
Yep. I was in Gettysburg for the Battlefield Bash that they do. They usually had it at the Wyndham, but I think they moved to another hotel. But I was there a couple years ago. Well, maybe it was 22. Might have been 22. But I was there for BB3 TV. The two other owners that we had at the time were not there for BB3 because they were too busy socializing all over the place, and I had to stay at the table. Story. And they were going off to the battlefield, and they were going out to eat. Me and my girlfriend, we stayed at the table giving away our free T-shirts that we all spent money on. And they would show up every once in a while, grab a little stack of T-shirts and leave. I'm like, I would like to walk around. But I wanted to get to the battlefield, and I wanted to make a video. I will get to the Gettysburg battlefield to make a video at some point.
Like I said earlier on, I think that is probably one of the most popular battlefields.
Yeah.
To paranormal investigators, it's one of the most.
A lot of it is still wild. A lot of it is still
is.
just left wild the way it was. You know what I mean? Like they didn't build anything on it.
Yeah,
there might be some signs on there, like just denoting that, here's this rock and here's a picture of what it looked like back then. They show all the bodies laying around and everything. And, just stuff like that.
Before, yep.
But I mean, obviously, you look on social media and you put in, Gettysburg ghosts, and you'll get all of these videos where paranormal investigators have been walking down the road, and you say you can hear the gunshot, or you can hear a cannon going off, or you see this misty shape walk across the road that they think's either a US soldier or a Confederate soldier.
Yeah, and they have video footage of them walking through the woods and stuff.
So I mean that hence why we decided to do tonight's show, because obviously Gettysburg is well known, but there are obviously a lot more haunted battlefields out there that maybe not get as much credit.
There's a location a lot closer to me than Gettysburg. Like I can get to it within a half hour. That's famous from I guess it was the Revolutionary War, or maybe whatever one that like Washington was leading his troops and they went across the Delaware. Washington's Crossing is literally like 30 minutes away from me, and I've been there and I did make a video there. It just wasn't paranormal. It was informational and just kind of like, wow, this is pretty. Look at this, kind of, But still, that was an important part of the battle that was going on. Even though they lost the battle, it was the Battle of Trenton, I think, because they were going across the Delaware into New Jersey, and they took, by these big ass boats that they made, they took their horses, all their artillery and everything they had across in these boats, and then they marched towards Trenton, and I think they lost that battle, but in the end it wound up being beneficial that they lost that battle, because our country right now here would be a lot different if they had won. I guess I don't know the specifics of the history of that. I know it's weird, a guy that does history videos doesn't know the history.
You're supposed to be the most interesting man of the YouTube world.
I am. Also the most handsome too. Yeah, I'm just saying. But I'm humble.
You know,
that was the most humble I've seen so far.
Yeah.
Well done.
you know, one of the things we like when we're talking, all this talk, you know, about these different battlefields, like the ones that don't get as much credit, which there's there's another one I could think of, which also was involved in the Civil War. Believe it or not, it does actually get quite the amount of attention, but kind of more on the history side than the paranormal side, surprisingly, and that is Antietam in Virginia, where the Battle of Antietam was, which that was obviously the bloodiest single day in U.S. history compared to Gettysburg. And I'm really surprised that they haven't had something similar like that in the case with the like an Antietam battlefield bash, if it makes
Keep
sense.
saying like you're saying Anti-M, and I keep thinking of the Wizard of Oz. Sorry.
No, you're
random
That's
thought.
just how I say it. They've lost the battle, but they have still won the war. Don't get Tom Ellie a big head.
I already have one. No, I'm kidding. I'm talking about this one. Perverts.
No.
I know what you all thought.
But you know, like there's just it's always Gettysburg that always gets a lot of the attention than a lot of the other battlefields, because it makes you wonder really like how many compared to Gettysburg, how many other battlefields out there that really have, you know, a lot of stories involving hauntings.
Yeah. I mean, there was even a portion of the like I was talking, the crossing of the Delaware River, which has been infamous in history, like paintings made of it and all that. There was a portion of that took place at my park where I work. There was a General Caldwater, I think his name was. He was supposed to be crossing the Delaware at that point, and he failed to get the equipment across. He could get the men across, but the equipment and the horses, I guess, were just too much to move through the ice of the Delaware at the time. And he failed, and Washington was not happy about that, of course. But that so there is some old history to the park that I work at. It's also said that William Penn, the first place that he made a deal with the Lenape tribe of Indians, was right there at Neshaminy State Park, on the right at the corner of where Neshaminy Creek and the Delaware River meet. So it said that, but I don't know for sure. But hey,
do you know of anybody who's actually seen any spirit from that era in that park?
No. I've had people say that they've heard things near the garden, but that's more to do with the Logan family, which only goes back about 100 years. But I've heard things in the garden too when I've been there. Like before I started working there, that was just a place I went to just sit and think and relax after me and the volunteers resurfaced all the brick paths and the human chessboard and all that stuff that's there. It was raining that day and nobody was in the parking lot. So I know nobody was walking around in the park. And I stood at one corner of the garden, and from the side, like kind of catty corner from me, like it sounded like a man's voice and a woman's voice. And I kept looking around, like, what the hell is going on here? And then I went over to that corner, and then where I was standing is where I heard the voices coming from. I'm like, all right, I couldn't hear words. I just heard the voice. And I thought I was going crazy. And then another time later after that, when I was doing a live feed, and you could actually hear it on the live feed, and it's on my Facebook for my YouTube channel somewhere. I'm in the middle, and the crowd, there was a lot of crowds in the park, but I'm in the middle of doing this live feed, and I swear to God, I heard somebody say, Tom. I turn around and look. I swear somebody just called my name. And then my partner in BB3 there, Dom, he was watching. He said, I heard it too. Plain as day. So it's on the video somewhere. I just never isolated it.
That's
I love
good.
what Kate said. Tom's, I was going to say, I love what Kate said. Tom's seen dinosaurs at Dinosaur Lake.
I saw their feet. That was all that was left.
I remember one time you said it can't get scary going into the woods of Philadelphia because, as you said, you don't know what you're walking into when it comes to like homeless people.
Oh, in my area alone, the homeless population has surged in the last like 5-6 years. So they're all throughout the woods, and they're littering up the woods so bad, and it makes me so angry.
Yeah.
I hate seeing litter in the woods in general, but when it's coming from people that I understand you don't have a home and everything. It doesn't mean you need to trash the place.
Yeah.
There's a mall right up the hill from where these people are in Dinosaur Lake. There's tons of trash bins, dumpsters, all kinds of stuff. They have bags down there. I know because they're all over the place. They could just put the stuff in the bag and take it up to the dumpster and throw it out.
Yeah, bag it and bin it.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate that you're homeless, but you don't have to be an ass.
Yeah.
Respect nature.
I was just thinking of a few other ideal battlefields, and one of them actually, Wayne, we talked about this last year along with Lois. It was actually more involving with World War II when we were talking about the 80th anniversary of D-Day and Omaha Beach. I mean, just imagine the amount of, activity that's probably occurring on that beach alone. In my opinion, I've always considered Omaha Beach as pretty much like Europe's Gettysburg when you really think about it, because so many, probably just as many lives were lost, on D-Day throughout Omaha Beach than just like it was in Gettysburg in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to a section of the Atlantic Wall, and I've been to one of the big gun emplacements there, and it has got such an oppressive feeling to it, And I think part of that is obviously knowing what happened and knowing what was there back in 1930 odd when they invaded into France and decided, right, we're going to fortify northern France because the British are at one point are going to come and we need to defend against it. And it's just weird, they've removed the guns from there and it's just literally the concrete base, and you're just thinking to yourself, this, I think to me, I couldn't go there as a paranormal investigator and investigate. I think I don't know. I would find it very hard out of respect to actually go there with a K2 meter and dowsers and rods and me equipment and go, if there are any spirits here, can you please come forward? Simply because of the thousands of people that died there needlessly.
Man, can you imagine the bombardment you'd get? These look, the ones that want to talk, they all just bum rush you, and you just hear this crowd.
I mean, 20,000 voices all start ringing out in your head, and you're just like, whoa, overload. But to me, it would be like going to Auschwitz and standing at the gates and going to a camera. No, I couldn't do that. And I've seen the backlash that people have got from standing there, jumping up in the air and smiling and waving at the camera. And I'm just like, that to me is so disrespectful that I got my size 11 up their backside if I'd have seen them doing it.
Yeah.
And I think some places they need to be left alone.
Some places, do you? You just keep.
I have to duck out. The goddess is leaving work and she's coming to pick me up, and I still have to make that as dinner. So thankfully it's a quick dinner to make. But
no problem.
We're having our date night tonight. a night late, but we're having it. So
Oh, lovely.
Anyway.
Cool.
anyway, I will see you guys later.
Yeah,
Yes,
have a great
enjoy your
time.
evening, Tom. Thanks for
Take
coming
care.
in.
Will. No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, see you soon,
Oh,
Tom.
And Tom,
Cheers,
says, Tom, you should end this on this note. You should be, well, he beat me to it.
That was the chicken.
I thought that was the audio clip. Well,
There it goes.
All right, I'll see you guys later.
all right, take
Cheers,
care,
Tom.
See you soon, Tom.
So, I mean, I wouldn't mind. I mean, me personally, I wouldn't go and investigate. However, I do want to go to these places, but I want to go there out of respect. Being ex-military myself,
Yeah.
my granddad and my grandma were involved in World War II as Navy and Royal Air Force. So for me, it's an ongoing thing for me. I've always had a thing about World War II on all aspects of it: the Navy, the Air Force, the Army. Whether it's been the UK, the United States, and believe it or not, even the German side of things, the history behind it.
Yeah.
And I don't think, to me, it's not just respecting those of the Allied forces, it's also on the Axis forces as well, because all of the people that were involved in that war died for no reason. And to me, I want to go there as a sign of respect.
Yeah.
I would go there to pay my respects to both sides. And, you know, I'd like to just go there and just get the feel of the place. My own personal experience. You know, rather than going there with a team and going, oh, is there something here? I'd rather that personal experience.
You know, when you really
that to me is more important.
When you really think about it, and I've talked about this before, like it was a few days after when we did our D-Day episode last year, in which a few days afterwards, again, first time I ever saw the movie Saving Private Ryan, which really goes a very detailed, you know, storyline involved, not just D-Day, but just involving World War II as a whole. And it just really goes to show that, you know, no matter which side that these people were on, the whole thing is tragic to me. Because died from both sides. And I actually did see somebody had wrote a YouTube comment saying, like, when you said, like, even on the German side of things, that you gotta give respect. When you really think about it, whoever this person it was who said that, he said a lot of these guys that fought on that day over 80 years ago, they were not doing this for Nazi Germany. They were not doing this for the Third Reich. They were not even doing it for Adolf Hitler himself. They were doing it because they thought they were just protecting and serving their country. Really no different than the Allies really were. So you got to basically have respect for this. And that's why when they had the anniversary last year, again, I know I said this before, but I was glad that not only did they had all the flags that included, you know, of the Allies, but they even decided to add the normal German flag to honor the Germans.
I think I know one thing that, and it was only, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago that I discovered this article, and it was about a guy during the First World War, and he was in the trenches, and there had just been an attack, and everything had all of a sudden gone quiet. And one of the British troops had seen a German soldier wandering around in no man's land, and he was injured. And this guy was going to shoot him to start off with. He literally got a bead on him, and he was going to end that man's life. And then he saw that the guy was injured, so he decided he was unarmed, he was injured. I'm not gonna kill him. So he let him go, and he pointed him back, told him where to go to get back to his own lines. And the bloke turned around and wandered back into his own lines. And that man that wandered back into his own lines being injured was Adolf Hitler.
No.
Wow.
So you can imagine what that man was feeling when he found out that soldier that he was going to kill was Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
He could have stopped World War II before it started. by taking him out, which is what he was going to do in the first place. And then he realised he was unarmed and he was injured. You don't shoot an unarmed man.
No.
Right.
So you let him go. You don't shoot him. You let him go. And he did. And it was Adolf Hitler.
That's just crazy.
Uh-oh.
So, you know, but that has obviously led to the next turn of events and things come on. And then Adolf Hitler gets into politics. And all of a sudden, the Nazi Party arises and World War II happens.
Yeah.
And you can imagine if the guy was still alive, can you imagine how he was feeling when he found out that Adolf Hitler had taken over Germany and was taking things by force?
You'd be gutted, wouldn't you?
It'd be like, oh my God, I could have killed him. I could have stopped all of this.
Yeah, it's like the absolute feel of guilt that would overcome this guy. I couldn't even imagine how he would have felt.
I mean, I'll see if I can find the article, but I don't know whether the guy actually made it as far as World War II or whether he died before. You know, whether he died sort of later on in World War II, one or whatever. I'll have to dig out the article again and find out, you know, the full history of it all. But it just, you know, it dumbfounds me.
Yeah.
But what that does do is it brings me to my next haunted battlefield. Did you see how I brought that one in? Okay. So we've got the link there, World War II to World War One, and we go straight in with Passchendaele in Belgium.
Oh,
in Belgium.
The third Battle of Ypres was an operation during the First World War in which the Allies attempted a major offensive in Flanders to disrupt German railroad supply of their troops to the front. The battle was fought from late July until mid-November 1917. Progress was slow, resistance was heavy, and the weather was unusually wet, and Allied casualties were heavy. So were German casualties, and as a result, an accurate account of the dead and wounded on both sides has remained a matter of debate since the operation was ongoing. Estimates and assigning casualties to other operations created a window of casualties of between 250,000 to 500,000 men for each side. The results of the campaign have remained controversial as well, with some contemporary analysts claiming that the attack all but crippled the German ability to continue the war, a statement given the lie when the Germans launched their spring offensive in 1918. David Lloyd George described the battle in his 1938 memoirs as one of the greatest disasters of the war. The countryside of Flanders and its towns and villages were devastated by the extended campaign, and little was gained other than further weakening both the British and German armies. A bloodletting which the British were better able to recover from as the American troops were beginning to arrive in large numbers. Two major actions were fought in October for possession of the Belgian town of Passchendaele, the first occurring on October the 12th. The heavy rains and clinging mud prevented artillery from being brought forward to support the advancing infantry, and the British and their allies lost 13,000 men in the failed assault. After waiting for the weather to clear, the British tried again on October the 29th, and this time succeeded in gaining control of the town, despite again enduring heavy casualties. By early November, the Allies, spearheaded by the Canadian Corps, held control of the town and its outlying areas. Now, to modern day, Passchendaele today, locals and visitors report encountering spirits and other paranormal activities to a large degree in the town and in the fields and woods which surround it, speaking several different languages. Figures dressed as World War I soldiers, both German and Allies, have been seen wandering through the town, on streets and alleyways, and have been encountered concealed in woods and along nearby streams. The sounds of gunfire, including automatic weapons, have been reported. Also reported have been the sounds of screaming and the issuance of orders in multiple language. The reports are so commonplace locally that they no longer generate much interest. Passchendaele is one of the several World War I battlefields in which extensive paranormal activity has been claimed. The Somme, Cambrai, and in and around Verdun have had occasional reports of ghosts or ghostly figures appearing, dressed in the distinctive garb of the First World War soldier. But none of these areas report the intensity or sheer number of occurrences as in the town of Passchendaele, where the reports have become so common that it is said that it is easier to find someone with personal experience of them than to find someone without.
Wow.
Wow.
See, that touches a chord with me because my great uncle died in the Somme. He was a stretcher bearer, and
Yeah.
I've actually got in that cupboard there. I've got a little Bible which belonged to him, and because before he went over there, he was in Gibraltar in the caves because he'd been injured in another war, and they made little Bibles out of the rock there. And I've got his signature up the side of it, which he scraped into it, and I've got it in that cupboard there. And he got I think it was his first day there in a ward, Oliver's ward, and he went to save his sergeant who'd been injured. And when he got there, he got took out straight away. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Sad, really.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. I mean, they all got called up anyway to go out to that army, but he wouldn't have had a chance because he got done for rabbiting. He stole rabbits out of the local woods. He got done for it. So when it was a call up, he had to go, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was it. His name was William Fellows.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. I'll show you.
I was going to say that name sounds really familiar for some reason to me.
Well, I will continue. I will now continue with my last battlefield because this one I find amazing, and I thought I've got to get this one in because I've read so much. I've read so much about it, and like I said, that having a thing about World War II, I'd known a lot about this with the likes of Hacksaw Ridge, an awesome film. I can't remember what they called it, the Conscientious Soldier or something, wasn't it? Where the guy said he weren't going to put bare arms and fight, so he ended up being a medic and pulling people off the field. And Hacksaw Ridge was where he literally grabbed injured troops and pulled them off and took them down this cliff face, and then went back and got some more, and he just constantly did that. And he ended up getting awarded the top honor or something. And I'm just thinking, this is amazing. And I looked into some of the history behind that, and it actually had a paranormal tale linked to it. Not on Hacksaw Ridge, but during the invasion of Okinawa, the Japanese fought from an extensive series of prepared underground bunkers and interconnecting caves, which forced the Americans to flush them out one by one in heavy fighting. United States Navy and Marines and US Army forces invaded the island on April the 1st, 1945. The battle will rage for 82 days before the island was declared secured. Total casualties, including civilians on Okinawa, would exceed 160,000 before the battle ended. Many of these were suicide by civilians, warned not to allow themselves to fall into the hands of the Americans. While the Marines and Army battled the Japanese across the island, Japanese kamikaze planes attacked the supporting US fleet in waves, causing heavy damage to some ships. Heavy casualties among some crews. Small boats were configured as suicide attack boats and sent out against the American fleet. The Japanese forced young Okinawan boys and old men into Japanese uniforms and frontline service, leading to their deaths at the hands of the Americans. The Japanese also forced civilians into several caves and provided hand grenades and poisons for them to use in mass suicides. As Japanese resistance began to crumble and the battle was winding down, one such cave was encountered by US troops. When the Americans arrived, one of the civilians in the cave helped to maintain calm among the civilians who were preparing to carry out the orders given to them by the Japanese soldiers. a former employee of an American sugarcane grower in Hawaii, he told the occupants that they would not be harmed by the Americans. The civilians in that cave, Shimuka Gamma, survived the battle and were unharmed and soon helped by the American troops. In another cave, Chibachiri Gamma, the Japanese had included a veteran of the war in China, and he insisted that the civilians resist the Americans with whatever they had or follow the order to commit suicide, rather than to submit to capture. The civilians followed his orders, some fighting with bamboo sticks and grenades, while others administered poison to their children before taking it themselves. 84 of the civilians in the cave died, most of them by suicide, as the Americans subdued the remainder. Other Okinawans committed suicide across the island, convinced that by the Japanese of the bestial behavior to expect from the Americans. Now, today, the Chibachiri Gamma is reported to be haunted, with the sounds of children screaming, sobbing, and cries of fear and pain reported by many who have visited the cave. Others have reported being instantly overwhelmed with feelings of fear or complete despair upon entering the cave. A memorial was erected outside of the cave to honour those who had died there, but it was destroyed in 1987 by Japanese nationalists who found it to be insulting to the emperor. The victims of Chibachiri Gamma were not combatants, but civilians caught up on a battlefield, casualties of war which some believe still haunt the place of their death.
Wow.
That's really interesting.
That is so
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, again, this
heartbreaking, but really
when
incredibly informative.
Exactly. When you look at the European side of the conflict, you had millions of people. Evening, Irene.
Hey, Irene.
Hey, Irene.
You have the European side of the conflict where millions of people lost their lives, and you also had the Asian side of World War II, which lasted a year longer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the civilians in these places, like Okinawa, were told the Americans will be nasty to you. They'll do this, they'll do that. And so there was a mind game being played with these people. They put the fear of God into these people, so they felt that they had no choice but to do these things. And like with Chibachiri, I will say it, Chibachiri Gamma, you know, there was a villager there that said, no, they're not like that. I've worked for them. And they're not like they're being saying that they are. And as a result, these people sort of, you know, they tried their best. And so, yeah, again, like with all of the locations we've discussed tonight, there's no reason why they wouldn't be haunted.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
And yes, it's a cave, but we now, when you look at this tale, you know the history behind that cave. You know the fact that people have lost their lives there. And, you know, why wouldn't it be haunted?
Yeah.
They died in some nasty circumstances.
Despair.
You know, and when I've watched documentaries about it, where you see them coming out the caves after they've been brainwashed, I've seen footage where they've just jumped off the cliffs because they were told the Americans would do some really nasty things to them.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my word, you know, they throw their child over the cliff and then go off themselves.
Oh,
and I'm like, no, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Totally heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And, you know, and again, it's all because one person's ideology caused all of that issues. And it's
mass hysteria, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's you know, it's again with the conversation that we are having tonight, it doesn't matter where or when the battle took place, you will find a haunted battlefield somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all residual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, again, like I said earlier on, I want to do the battlefield tour.
That'd be ace. I'd do that, you know. I
And
really would.
my sister's other half, they obviously they live in Corfu. They're Greek, and my sister's other half wants to do the same. Thank you, Irene. I'll have a look at them when the show's finished. You know, he wants to do the tour, but it means he has to come over to the UK first, and then we go from here on this battlefield tour.
Yeah.
And I've said to him, I'd love to come with you, but the only problem is my son Ethan wants to go on that tour as well.
Oh,
So it's going to end up being a family affair. We're all going to end up going over there, and we want to visit all of these places, the Atlantic coastal defences, and go into, maybe head towards Poland and go to the likes of Auschwitz and Birkenau and all of that. Simply because it's, to me, I want to respect all of those that have died because of that conflict.
Yeah.
Right.
And since the conflict that was there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like I said, I've said before, I had a friend of mine, he became a friend of mine. He was a friend of my mum's first. She used to go around and clean his house for him. He was the member of the Desert Rats, and he used to take the orders in from Montgomery. And he would tell me some tales that I was shaking my head. Some of the things that they had to do when they were in North Africa. I mentioned it on the pre-record for Saturday night that you know, they were out there in North Africa, and water was all important.
Yeah.
So they couldn't use it to wash. So what they had to do, because they had limited water but plenty of fuel, they used the fuel to wash with.
Oh, wow.
So they would use a rag, they would douse it in the fuel, and they would rub the fuel on their arms, legs, etc. to clean themselves. They were told, under no circumstances do you smoke, obviously. So you let yourself dry out fully first, and then get your clothes back on, and then you're free to do whatever. One particular man did not take heed of the warnings, and he just finished wiping his arms down, and the first thing he did while he was waiting to dry out was light up a cigarette and sit in the sand. So, of course, he lit the cigarette and set fire to his arms. And it was things like that that he told me that I found absolutely amazing. They were also quite inspiring as for me, as being a writer. I found his stories quite inspiring, which has now given me a story that I will be writing, and he's going to be mentioned in a forward that I'm going to put in there, because he sadly passed away about 7-8 years ago, and he was an amazing guy. And when he left the army, he went into being a architect. Quite a few of the water towers around here were designed by him. So he was quite well known and locally for being an architect.
Yeah.
And so for his life to carry on after the war in such a way set him up for the rest of his life. And he met Doris, and she passed away, and it just left him on his own. So myself and my mum ended up being the conversations that he had.
Oh.
He didn't really talk to anybody else. So my mum would go around there a couple of times a week. I'd go around there a couple of times a week to do his garden for him.
Lovely.
So I would be responsible for getting his garden all nice and tidy for him.
Yeah.
And then while we were having a cup of tea or coffee, we'd sit there and we would chat about the things that happened to him. And now normally an ex-serviceman does not talk about his experiences to anybody.
No, they don't.
You know, and normal people would not hear of these personal experiences maybe until after they've passed and they've written memoirs. But when you've got a veteran to a veteran, there is that sort of how can I put it? There's a connection between the two of you, regardless of time. You know, you've got one veteran from the 1940s talking to a veteran from the 1990s,
Yeah.
and it's a free flow conversation, and you end up talking about the things that happened or things that you've experienced or seen, and the stuff he was coming out with, it was just unbelievable. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, you know, we see these documentaries about battles in the Somme, in the First World War, and then all these different battles around the world during the Second World War. And we don't see these little stories about what troops did in their downtime,
Right.
Yeah.
like setting fire to their arms, you know, in a pure accident while they're having a clean up, you know. And it was just amazing just to hear these little stories, because normally 9 times out of 10 it's, oh, Rommel came in from this direction, Monty came in from this direction, they had a bit of a powwow, went off again, did their own thing after the Allies had managed to gain 20 kilometres of ground, and then 3 days later Rommel comes back and takes 40 kilometres back, and it's all about fighting, but it's not about what they did in their downtime.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
to hear stories of what happened in their downtime,
Things that are actually
makes all
more
the difference.
interesting, I find. When I speak to my granddad about the First and Second World War, when I used to speak to him about stuff, it was all the dumb things that they told him to do that he was like, "You what, mate? You what? I have to do what?" They threw my granddad into literally driving a truck or something, and he didn't have a license, he didn't know how to drive, and they're like, "Yeah, you're driving to Germany tomorrow," and he was like, "Oh." He was like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "Yeah, you're going to sit in a field and you're going to wait for the Germans to come," and he was like, "Am I? Fantastic, thank you guys." Like, and so off he went, you know. They said, "Yeah, you go round that little bit, round that roundabout a few times and come back, and then off you go tomorrow morning." And he was like, oh, okay. I'll see you later then.
You see,
Yeah.
the thing is, when you hear stuff like that and they turn around and go, "Oh, yeah, I was told, here's the keys to the truck, get in there and drive to point B." You know, and you're like, "I haven't got a license, I can't drive." Well, you can now. Off you go.
Yeah, off you go. Yeah, see you later.
I'll be right
It's things like that, you know. I bet you he was able to drive when he came home.
Yeah, no, he was fine.
Yeah,
He was like,
he
"Well,
was.
I've been thrown in the deep end," sort of thing,
Yeah,
but at least I
but
came
that's
off
the thing.
okay.
Things like that, conflicts like that, there's no boundaries. You don't need a license to drive a vehicle when something like that's going on.
No, you
Guys,
just have to get on with it.
Yeah.
Guys, I'll be back in a sec. I gotta grab something quickly, so I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, mate.
Okay, no problem, mate.
So yeah, you know, you've got World War II's raging away, and you know, you've got to get things from A to B as quick as possible.
Regardless,
they're gonna grab the first person they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
They're gonna go, "You take that truck," but I've only got one leg. No, you're still taking it.
Yeah, you're still going, even if you have to use your hand. Like, you have to do a handstand in the seat. I don't care. You're getting there.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you got troops that had an instant first aid course from a medic. You know, you can picture the start of Saving Private Ryan when they land on the beaches at Omaha. You know, you've got a medic trying to save a man's life, and somebody to the side of that person you're treating has just been shot as well. He's losing his life. So unless you can grab somebody else and tell them to plug that wound while you're treating the other guy,
what are you going to do?
You've instantly turned that other person from an infantryman into a medic.
The thing is, when you're in that situation, you think of it, you know about this way. You've got no choice. You've got to do it. It's an automatic built-in thing in every human to go and help somebody else, and you would, wouldn't you? You would just do it. It's automatic.
The problem is with the likes of D-Day, a lot of people that went onto them beaches were youngsters. They weren't expecting they weren't expecting what they got.
Yeah, it was
And
shocked.
a lot of people, the second they got off of those landing crafts, they got shell shocked straight away because there was
Well,
mortar
the
rounds and
propaganda
shells
was
and bullets whizzing past their heads.
glorified,
You know,
wasn't it?
people were getting blown up in the landing craft. You know, you got people going ashore wearing fuel tanks on their backs for the
Yeah.
flamethrowers.
Do you know what got me in that film?
You think that's
Private
bad?
Ryan, in that shot in that park, because it went on for a long time, didn't it?
Yeah.
The realness of it.
Yeah.
The sounds of the bullets going into
What?
the water. The when they're going deaf. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was absolutely spot on.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
that was because Steven Spielberg actually had a long consultation with people, surviving members of the brigades that went ashore on Omaha Beach.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
talked to them about their experiences and how they felt, what was going on, what they could see and hear. And then they went into ballistics, and they got ballistics dummies, and they fired rifles of the time from both Allied and Axis, and fired them at the dummies and gone, there you go. This is what happens when this dummy gets hit with this particular round. So they knew for the special effects how to portray that person being shot. And as a result, you know, Saving Private Ryan was born, followed by Band of Brothers,
yeah.
then the Pacific, and then Masters of the Air. And they were all done the same way.
Yeah. Amazing.
They had heavy consultation with the people that survived those particular incidences. And that's what made it more real. You know, I mean, my cousin went to go and see Saving Private Ryan in the cinema, and she didn't even make it to the end of the beach landing scene.
That I'm
She
not,
she walked out.
I'm not surprised by it. I mean,
And
that was
I took the mickey out of her.
I heard for people that lived through the actual war and they saw Saving Private Ryan like that, they couldn't even make it through, and that they actually had to go get therapy after they saw it.
It was like a flashback.
It was.
Yeah.
It really was.
I mean, my cousin walked out literally before the end of the scene, where I think it was the bit when he meets Corporal Upham with the typewriter.
Yeah.
And he keeps asking Tom Hanks if it's all right if he brings his typewriter, and he says, you don't need that, and throws it on the floor. You know, my cousin walked out before that scene, and I turned around to her and I said, what the hell persuaded you to go and see Saving Private Ryan, a war film, knowing full well that for the duration of the film, most of that is going to be people shooting each other or blowing each other up?
Yeah.
Yep.
And she went, well, it's got Tom Hanks in it.
Yeah, this is it. It's like
Yeah.
that.
I'm like, Jesus, even the poster shows you what it's about.
You know, it's like
Tom
that
Hanks
film,
even
Pearl
himself
Harbor
had,
one.
Tom
Sorry.
Hanks even himself had attended the 80th anniversary of D-Day last year, and there were actually people who had written, because I seen the interview of him on YouTube, and there were people that, obviously who'd seen Saving Private Ryan, they would refer Tom Hanks to his character name instead of his actual name, like saying, glad to see, I forgot what his name was in the film. They say, glad to see his character's still doing alive.
Captain Miller.
Yeah, Captain. Glad to see Miller still going, but obviously, as we all know, that wasn't the case at the end of the film, of course. And see, I got a feeling like with a lot of people, like a lot of the survivors that had fought during the war and then saw this movie, Saving Private Ryan, it's not surprising when you go on YouTube and see clips, you will probably find hundreds of comments. I mean, I found a lot of them where you had grandkids, people who saw this movie with their grandfathers, and you would hear almost the same exact thing, like, what made them want to see it and the reactions they give, either halfway or near the end of the film. One of them that you most often hear a lot of times is, they might ask their grandfather saying, was this really what it was like when you fought in it? And a lot of them, again, was the same response. They would just simply say, I was just doing my job. I was just doing what I was supposed to do. And that was it.
I mean,
Yeah.
Tom Hanks
And a lot
Tom
of them didn't
Hanks
have
is a bit
choice,
of a
did they?
World War II historian.
He is. He really is.
And he was the executive.
I'm sorry, Wayne, go ahead.
He was the executive producer and director of some episodes of Band of Brothers, and was an executive producer in Pacific.
And that's what I was about to get to, actually. Yeah, he executive produced. And I haven't seen the full series of Band of Brothers, but I have seen some clips of it. In fact, not surprisingly, they showed some clips of that show to us back when I was in high school. So we got to see a full view of it. And I even told my mom about that after we saw Saving Private Ryan. I said, well, it's not necessarily as I would call a sequel, but it still obviously takes place during World War II.
Yeah.
And my mom was interested in watching it, but then after she saw Saving Private Ryan, she thought that was enough. She thought, I don't know if I can get through a whole series after what we saw with that movie, because I'm not going to lie, like, my mom was kind of in tears, especially after that opening sequence of D-Day.
Yeah.
It was very, very hard for her to watch.
I mean, even though it's about,
we had to take a break from that movie. It was getting late. I mean, I know it's a very long movie too, but we had to take a break because it was starting to become too much for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very hard hitting film, really. I mean, in a sense, rather than being an entertainment film, I would have said that was more of a documentary film.
Like a historical sort of thing.
Because on the historical side of things that actually happened during that film were things that happened during the war itself.
Yeah.
And that then comes through in Band of Brothers. Now, me and Ellen, we watch Band of Brothers every year. We watch the whole series. I've got it twice on DVD in case one of them gets worn out.
Yeah. I know
because we love the Band of Brothers. I've just got a connection with World War II. Band of Brothers is really close to me, and I watch it every year without fail, sometimes twice a year. And I'll watch it from beginning to end. And the guy, Damien Lawrence, who plays Captain Winters at the start of the show, he was a real life character, and it does follow the lives of Easy Company from the moment they go through basic training right the way through to the end of the war. And it's Winter's account of actually what happened and what they went through. Like Spears, Captain Spears, he walked past down to a group of German conscripts, basically, and it turned out that one of them was actually from America. But because the Germans made a call out to German migrants that moved over to America, this guy's family moved back to Germany to fight for Germany. And yet he was literally just down the road from one of the American troops.
Right.
And then this Spears guy comes down, offers out cigarettes, and then shoots them all.
Oh, my God.
And that was an account of one of the members of Easy Company that was in his diary. That he'd literally come down, and as he was walking back, he heard the gunfire, and all the German soldiers were dead. And it was that guy that shot them all.
Yep.
Do you know what? It's like the aftermath of stuff. You don't normally hear about the aftermath after a battle has gone. We had one of our local ladies in Connors Key. She married an American Air Forceman, and she moved over to Hawaii because that's where he was from. But when he was a little boy, he was at school, and he seen all these Japanese planes going over the fields, and he was waving. Him and his mates were waving because they didn't know what They were just planes, but they had the Japanese. They were waving, and he said, and then the sky was just red, and it was just red with fire, you know. He said, but his dad worked on the docks, and he said, and every day his mother had filled a basket full of food, and she'd take it down to him because it was their job to get all the dead bodies out that they actually could manage to get out after the aftermath had finished. Yeah, and it's to hear that coming off a guy from there and actually seeing, it was quite touching, you know, when he grew up and he went into the Air Force, and it's a natural thing for him to do, but it was the stories he was telling, it was quite touching.
But that was because leading up to Pearl Harbor, nobody realized what was going to happen. It was a complete surprise.
Right.
And so when the planes started coming in, even over areas that were open, like all the farmland and fields and things, when you had, like you said, he was standing in his schoolroom and saw all these planes flying over, they waved to them because they didn't realise that was going on.
The pilots were waving to them.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so they thought it was just like a simple, everyday, innocent kind of thing, not realizing, you know, what was really
was coming.
Yeah.
Japanese soldiers.
And again, the perfect example of that is Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, Pearl Harbor.
And that's what it was, because that's where he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where he was, because he lived on the island. Yeah.
I like what Irene had said about Agasara Island. It has nothing but soldiers' bones, and it's a resort island off of Tokyo. And a recovery system is bringing the bones back to Tokyo to help the dead. And you can only get there by boat. It takes 1.5 days to get there. Helicopters are being used to retrieve the bones from the beaches, and want to make a bet that it's haunted. There's no doubt something like that would certainly be haunted, especially with so many human remains that still have been in that location for decades. Not to mention that these were not soldiers that were properly buried like they should have been, like not being properly buried with honor, respect, or participation, you know, fighting for their country. Yeah. So
it could even be worse, actually, because
removing them as well.
What's that?
Yeah.
You've also got the fact that you are also removing those bones as well, and that can sometimes drag up a lot of spiritual activity if you move them from where they were.
I would I see this a lot with a lot of locations like this, but like what Irene just described is that it's like deep within that soil are basically are practically the remains of what I would probably call kind of like the old remains, of some of the old parts remains of Japan, and the remains of obviously somebody's great grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for a little bit of a weird one to end, because we've got to finish in a minute. To end this, we've been talking about haunted battlefields, and we've been talking about movies that obviously portray things that happened. This one is going to make you scratch your head in disbelief. But Hiru Onoda was a Japanese soldier who served as a second lieutenant in the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. One of the last Japanese holdouts, Onoda continued fighting for nearly 29 years after the war finished in 1945. He was found on Lubang Island in the Philippines in 1974, still wearing his Japanese Imperial Army's uniform.
Wow.
Do you know what? I've heard about this. I've heard something about that.
I've never heard of this. This is new for me.
So it's true.
Yep.
Wow.
It's like
he was born March 19th, 1922, and he died on the 16th of January 2014. He was still fighting for the Imperial Japanese Army in 1974 when he was discovered. He ran out the bushes at people and prepared to fight and kill them.
It's like a time
Wow.
capsule almost.
He thought exactly because it was a small island, and people overlooked it because they didn't see it had any significance to anybody, and he was still on that island, thinking the war was still on.
That is
Oh,
crazy.
bless
Yeah,
I think I remember you talking about that to me, Wayne, a few years ago. And
I have
think you
mentioned it
actually-
before, yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, he did not know. Like, he didn't know it was
not
anything
word about
that
it. So,
happened.
again, it's like the island served as like a time capsule for
Yeah.
him. That's when
Frozen in
Yeah.
time. I mean, 29 years after the war, he had no communication with
clue.
anybody.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, poor guy.
And it sort of, in a way, reminded me
Ah.
of these people in the rainforests, you know, that
Yeah.
have never had human interference from anywhere. And then
Yeah.
all of
they
a sudden,
kinda
this
go
guy
feral
comes in wearing a
now.
Nike T-shirt and playing a radio, going, "Hello, way!"
yeah, which they didn't
And
have
it's that
back then.
interference from the outside world.
Yeah,
And I thought, you can imagine what this poor bloke thought when these people turned up. When you do realise it's 1974.
yeah, and
He's like, what? How did
40
that
years
happen?
ago.
Actual.
Yeah. You
Did
do
I
know
go
the
into
war
the
ended
future?
29 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, whoops.
Well, I've just run out on you for no reason now.
Yeah.
Now I look like a horrible
To
person.
be honest, I think he turned around and he said, "Well, it's a good job you found me because I've just run out of loo paper."
Yeah, he's just sitting there like, so I didn't have to
I was
hunt
thinking
for
of
my
having to
own
use
food.
these leaves.
Right? If you
Quite
guys
funny.
don't mind, I actually just wanted to throw out one more haunted battlefield story, because this is one that I thought would be really quick to address. It's
Okay.
not involving World War II, but it's involving the Civil War. And it's kind of another least known location, unless you're in the area. It's also a haunted fort too. You guys ever heard of Fort Pulaski? You guys ever heard of that location?
No.
No,
So
I
it's-
don't think so.
So
You
it's
ever heard of
located.
that?
It's located on Cockspur Island, Georgia, which is just outside of Savannah. So obviously one of the most haunted cities in the U.S. So not surprisingly, it was once considered an impregnable fortress when it first was built, and that was until the events that occurred in 1862. Now, from what I remember, was the daybreak, again, keeping it real short, the daybreak of April 10th, 1861, actually, the Union batteries opened up. Fort Pulaski was hit with more than 5,000 shells, with 10 or 12, in like 10 or 12 each minute. They would be digging these gigantic holes within the side of the wall. And here's the thing, if you go to that fort today, those holes are still within the walls itself. And what makes, as a result from the hauntings, what makes it so haunted was that in 1861, after a 36-hour cannon siege, 600 Confederate officers were then in prison under torturous conditions, like a lot of these forts were. A lot of times it was like worm-infested rations, losing weight every day. They died of diseases such as pneumonia and dysentery and starvation.
Starvation, yeah.
Like when you have
Definitely.
tragedies like that, obviously it hangs in there forever. And it is believed that many people believe that the spirits of the dead rebel soldiers still remain at Fort Pulaski. And
Wow.
late at night, it said that people could hear guns firing, people dying, and strangely enough, this definitely seems really out of the ordinary. People have even heard a little girl crying at this place, which I thought, that's odd. Why would there be a little girl, spirit remaining at a fort? And somebody told me back in my days of high school that there was, I think there might have been, I don't know if it was like, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think this was before it became, like a tourist attraction. But I guess there was some story that this girl may have found a gun, I guess, that supposedly belonged to one of these soldiers, and it accidentally fired and killed her instantly. I could be wrong. It was many years ago I was told that. I'm still trying to find accuracy to it, but this is definitely it's definitely a location I've actually been wanting to investigate for the longest time. But not only is it known for its hauntings in history, as a matter of fact, this fort has also been featured in a well-known Civil War movie. So my question to you guys is, so how many of you guys seen the movie Glory? with Morgan Freeman. Has
Yeah.
anybody seen that?
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen it. Oh dear.
Right, Nick, we're gonna have to do a two-parter or something
Yeah, we're
because
gonna have
we're now
to.
overrunning into somebody else's showtime.
Yeah. So
Um,
we'll have to save it. But there was
Yeah.
something I wanted to say, but I'll save it for next time.
Okay.
So yeah, that'll be it from us tonight. Unfortunately we've got to stop because otherwise we're going to overrun into somebody else's show.
Well, I think it's show next.
So we'll be back again tomorrow night at 8:00, where we'll be talking general paranormal. And obviously, don't forget the live stream through or the podcast, 22-hour podcast for veteran suicide awareness on Saturday, which myself and Lois are going to be in for an hour. So take care, everybody, and we will see you tomorrow night.
Have a good night,
you
guys.
for coming along.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Good night.